Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's training industry webinar, AI-Powered Learning, the Still Human Future of Corporate Training. I'm Elizabeth Parker, Director of Marketing at Training Industry, and I'm so happy you all decided to join us for today's event. We have a super exciting session in store for us today as we will hear some of the data and insights that Training Industry has collected about how artificial intelligence can be used in corporate training. So before I pass the mic over, just a few housekeeping items from me to make sure you get the most out of your time with us. First of all, please use the chat to collaborate with other attendees as you are doing already. Let's keep that collaboration going throughout the session. We love to see it. If you have questions for our speakers, you can submit those by clicking on the Q&A icon in your toolbar. In this window, you will also have the opportunity to upvote questions that are submitted by your peers. So help us address the most popular questions. And we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the session. And we'll also try to answer some of your questions throughout the session. I will be enabling closed captions for this event, so you can select to turn on or off the subtitles by locating the closed caption icon in your toolbar. And of course, we love to see collaboration continue on social media. You can share your key takeaways and tag at Training Industry, Training Industry without the Y, and hashtag TI webinars. When the program ends, you'll be redirected to a brief survey. We do value your feedback about every webinar we produce and use it to provide future content that's relevant to your role. And as always, today's webinar will be recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com. You'll receive a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand program that you can review again later or share with a team member who might not be able to join today. If this is your first Training Industry webinar with us, a special welcome goes out to you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning leaders like you. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's webinar, as well as through articles on our website and magazine, through industry research, courses, and our podcast, just to name a few. Training Industry is your go-to resource for L&D insights. Learn more at trainingindustry.com. Now let's get this session started. Let me introduce you to our speakers and my colleagues. We have Ken Taylor and Tom Whelan. Ken Taylor is CEO of Training Industry and has focused on the corporate training landscape for more than 17 years with a specific eye to the role learning technology plays in adult learning. Prior to that, Ken spent 17 years in the tech industry with senior roles in operations and finance. Dr. Tom Whelan is Director of Corporate Research here at Training Industry. Prior to joining the team, he worked as an organizational consultant, designing and evaluating selection practices and training programs. Tom has also published in leading journals and presented at international conferences. So Tom, Ken, the floor is now yours.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, so we should all be looking at the slides. So the title of today's webinar is AI-Powered Learning, the Still Human Future of Corporate Training. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have made the case to you that the future is in fact still human. But there's a lot of exciting places that we can take the future of corporate learning with artificial intelligence. So here's a quick rundown of the agenda, how this is going to work this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where you're joining us from. First, we're going to define a few of the pieces, just kind of walk people through it, especially if you haven't had exposure to it. Kind of what do we mean when we're talking about AI? And what do we mean when we're talking about the types of AIs that have become popular, particularly in the last 6 months? Then we're going to go on to discuss some of the benefits and challenges of using AI in L&D. We're going to talk a little bit about the wild world of tools that's already out there. And then we're going to end things with a few next-gen case studies on some of the exciting developments that we've seen out there in the market. And then, as Elizabeth already alluded to, we're going to leave room for questions at the end. Ken and I have tried not to stack these slides too much, so hopefully there's plenty of time at the end for some back and forth. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken to start to talk us through why we even wanted to do this webinar in the first place.
Yeah, so why a webinar on artificial intelligence? Besides everybody's talking about it, we thought a training industry might have a bit of a unique perspective. We have the luxury of being able to attend industry events, get demonstrations by suppliers, case studies from people that are actually using these technologies in their day-to-day life, along with sort of our exposure editorially to the community that represents training industry, of all the folks that are writing about it and writing about use cases and how they're using it today. And then add to that the fact that we also build our own courses. We felt like we might be able to share some things that we've learned in this first couple of month journey through AI and its impact on what we're all living through these days. We, as an organization, did something really interesting. We held an all-hands meeting with all of the employees on the team at Training Industry, and we all talked through our personal experiences using AI, whether to supplement or help us through our job, whether to help build learning, whether to ask questions that we needed answers with, to give us guidance before we started on projects. And it was just an amazing time to hear the impact it has on just about every employee's life here at Training Industry. And I can imagine that you are all starting your journey through the use of these powerful tools in your own daily lives. So what we're going to try and do today is talk you through where we're seeing it being used, give you some personal experiences, and so perhaps a cautionary tale or two, and then maybe kind of go through some data that we've collected too, to just kind of share with you what's happening or what we're seeing, and then wrap it up with some pretty cool companies that we've had the luxury of having had a demo on, and start to share with you some of the places where both Tom and I see the potential use for it and that's where it's actually being used today. So we'll try and make our way through that whole journey. So the second reason why we thought we should have a webinar on AI at Training Industry is this represents the search activity for artificial intelligence in the US over the last 6 months. So as you can see, everybody's pretty interested in how it's going to impact their life, and not only their life, but the job part of their life also, and their personal part of their life. There's a lot of concerns, anxiety around it. There's a lot of opportunity and excitement about it. And we just felt it would be time right now to put some context, because one of the things that we thought that's so important to us kind of as a company is to make sure that when you guys have some questions, we might have some answers. So we're going to try and give you some of those today.
That said, we're going to start off with a question for everybody in the audience. So we wanted to get a feel for everybody that's here today, what your organization's current appetite for using AI in employee training might be. So is it A, you're rabid fans, you can't wait to see what it can do for your organization? B, you're a bit leery, taking a bit of a wait and see approach, maybe not sure what the actual use case might look like, but you have some ideas. Or C, you're scared of it, I'm pretty sure it's made of spiders, or maybe you have an active policy against the use of AI at your company. Or D, you're really not sure, but you've seen the movies and you know that it's not good on spaceships. Or at least all the movies would suggest that.
All right, everybody, our first opportunity to sound off. Let us know what it's like in your organization around using AI and employee training.
There's clearly no wrong answer except the one related to spaceships.
We've got some people saying maybe something in between A and B.
Well, that could be.
But we'll give you all maybe 5 more seconds to sound off here, and I'll wrap this poll up in 3, 2, and 1. Here are our results.
Yeah, somewhere between A and B.
This is for what it's worth. I'm sure everybody can see the results. So 47% of people here say they're fans. About a third say a wait and see approach. Another 20% say they're uncertain. But happily, only 3% say their company is against it, or at least believe it's made of spiders, like I alluded to. But this is good, and this is how we feel of the general temperature out there in the market is for a lot of this. So there's a lot of people that are fans. There's a lot of people that are kind of playing a wait and see approach, waiting to see how things shake out, or they're not quite sure how these technologies might apply to their own business. And others are they're uncertain. They're exploring. Like a lot of these tools kind of get put out there with the tag experimental on them, and rightly so. Some of them are still rather experimental. All right, so in this next section, we're going to talk through kind of defining some of the pieces of what an AI is, or at least kind of what invoking the term AI, what that has turned into. So I mean, I think it probably goes without saying, AI is not very new. I mean, it's been in movies for decades, kind of as we joked about a second ago. But the use of AI technology, especially in business, is not something that is just now knocking at our door. It's been around for a while. But to kind of categorize it, I think what most of us probably have had experience with over the course of several years at this point is what we would now call like a simple or a narrow AI. So it's the things that drive search engine algorithms. It's helplines, simple kind of chat bots that don't understand the question that you phrase to them. And like recommendation engines that have algorithms behind them, can handle complex information, but aren't necessarily, there's not an exchange going on. You're throwing something into an algorithm and it's spitting something back out to you. So for a long time, I think a lot of us have experience with these, and there's a lot of organizations that have found ways to build these into their business processes, and somewhat into their training. But what we are kind of grappling with now in the market is the advent of what's called general or super AI. And this is the fun and expensive stuff. So these are things like large language models, which we're going to talk about more in a second. The ability for things in training or customer service, whatever it is, to have complex conversational text. And a lot of this stuff is built on the back of what's called natural language processing. And this is like, I guess they call it like a flavor of artificial intelligence, but what it's really focused on is the interaction between humans and computers, machines, basically. And what it's trying to do is close the gap between the extremely imperfect way that we write and speak language, and the rigid way that machines kind of accept input. So it's trying to fine tune, our just, we can casually phrase a question 50 different ways, and a machine's ability to parse that apart and understand kind of, or at least a quote in quotes, understand what the query is that's coming in. So we'll get a little bit more into kind of what underpins that in a sec. But alongside kind of all these other or these more expansive AI models, you have things like avatars or NPCs for the kids in video games. Technologies like facial recognition that has some drawbacks and flaws, but is getting better all the time. We have integrated recommendation engines, things that are sort of at the hub of an inflow and outflow of information. And also generative AI, things that are able to not just work with language input, but start to work with audio and visual information, and pictures and things like that. Easy example is the stuff that Adobe is putting on the market nowadays with their ability to just create visual things for you. So the kind of Gen 1 of simple narrow AI was neato, but the stuff that we're seeing now with the general and super AI is the stuff I think has a lot of businesses excited, and kind of the contrast to the simple AI, this large language model, natural language processing type of stuff has really only come to the forefront in the past 5 years or so, and clearly for most of us, we've only been made aware of it maybe in the last 6 months. So let's talk a little bit about what is a large language model, because that's kind of for most of the things that we're interacting with nowadays, whether it's just with ChatGPT, whether it's with Google Bard, any number of other products that are APIs that sit on top of one of those AIs. All of that stuff at the core is driven by what's called a large language model. And what or how these get created is with machine learning, which is a kind of a scary phrase, but just means you're trying to teach a computer to do some stuff. But it's focused very, very specifically on language. And in particular, it is focused on the probabilities within language. So the model itself, for what it's called, is full of what's called parameters. That if anybody's tried to read technical documentation, you've come across X thing has however many number of parameters. And really all that is, or what that represents, is associations between words and contexts. That is what these models are trying to parse apart. So it's looking at okay, if you have this word, what tends to precede it, what tends to follow it, and that might seem like a simple sort of appraisal for it to make, but it's repeating that billions and billions of times over and over and over again. What it's transforming is kind of the language. I mean, I don't know how many people kind of are aware, but like the GPT in ChatGPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. It's it's thrilling as a dentist's office visit, in terms of a name, but it's a transformer. That's what it's doing. But kind of also key to this whole idea is that it's probabilistic. So it doesn't really have like an intelligence like we might think it does, but it's trained on mountains and mountains of text to try to predict what comes next when you throw a prompt at it, and kind of for it to have all of these parameters at its disposal, for us to be able to ask it something silly and be able to give us an answer back, it takes a lot. It needs at least billions of parameters to be fed into it, meaning you're talking about gigabytes upon gigabytes of text. I mean, one easy way, or the best way I saw it phrased was for anybody that's familiar with Mad Libs, it's like fun, complete the word things. It's that, but millions and millions and millions of times over and over again. That's kind of what the process of trying to train one of these models is sort of like. And I mean, it can be expensive for a company to try to stand up. An estimate I found, granted a couple years old at this point, but in 2020, to train a model was estimated to cost about $1.6 million. I'm sure that cost has come down in that time, but still, for a long time, these things weren't cheap. So even for it to not work well, it was still expensive to have something not work all that well. For the most part, they needed distributed software to be able to run on, especially if it's something that you need to be able to handle queries a lot. And the biggest gotcha with these things, and kind of what is I think core to some of the problems that, or some of the humorous mistakes that it sometimes makes, is that any single one of these models requires a whole lot of testing and model validation. So basically, like, you can feed it everything that you want. You think you can have all the parameters right, but you have to test it and test it and test it some more to make sure that the kind of output that it gives you at least looks right, or it's quacking like a duck and walking like a duck, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of at a glance what a large language model is. It's basically just looking at probabilities of words and having a computer do it and just rinsing and repeating, to the tune of billions, and even with some of the newer ones that are coming out now, trillions of times. And so with that, we're going to move on to talking about, from how these things are defined in general to how we think these things and how we see these things fitting into L&D.
And I just want to add one thing to Tom's definition there. I think the most important thing is the way we access the data, and that's through natural language processing. So that's the big opportunity. We can now interact with that data, with those models, by using simple phrases, and that's the game changer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So where does it fit in the context of L&D? So I won't hold everybody in suspense. We can drop the arrows. Pretty much everywhere. So we're seeing it in the context of advanced technologies. In other words, technologies that allow you to quickly build courses. I'll talk you through specifically how it interacts with the course development cycle. It also plugs into most experiential technologies that you use, being things like Zoom, whether it be your LMS that has classrooms in it, or any technical experience, a lab, a coaching platform. It has the ability to touch all of those types of technologies when you're experiencing learning. Delivery tech, so anytime that there's an interaction over a digital interaction in the context of learning, AI can be used to better understand and process the analytics associated with those interactions. So you have the total experience technology. You also talk about delivery tech, and then admin tech in the context of the LMS. It's going to. I was at the Learning Tech conference. There was hundreds of examples of how using machine learning, as Tom mentioned, there are certain processes that get repeated over and over and over that are becoming simplified by using AI to prompt you through the creation, as opposed to making you, the administrator, have to do all of those individual transactions yourself. So just think of it like, it'll prompt you to say what information you need when you load the new course in the system, or it'll prompt you through the scheduling exercise when you set it up, or it'll prompt you to make sure that there's an instructor associated with that event. It'll do the things to make sure that you don't set something up incorrectly, because those patterns are repeated over and over and over and over. So it's using that data that it's collecting from those various places to improve, simplify routines, improve quality, and improve experiences. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about a bunch of areas. And I did see a couple questions pop up, and Elizabeth is allowed to interrupt me on the next slide, so we'll do that when we get there. So here's what we've seen AI used for in L&D. And we ran out of room on the slide, so there's probably more. But first off, we've seen models that will do the complete authoring. You give it a set of learning objectives and a topic, and excitingly, it will give you a first draft of a course. It will do all of the design, and I'll show you actually a company that does that. But there's several elements within content authoring, whether it be the creation of some of the imagery, whether it be the actual e-learning slides, whether it be creating instructor manuals. It can give you a first draft of the content for a course by just prompting it correctly up front. And I use the first draft of a course very specifically in terms of the language, because it may or may not be completely correct, but it'll give you enough that you can interact effectively and much more efficiently with a subject matter expert, because you come to the table with at least a framework. Curating content. So it can now independently select the best of the content available to it and make recommendations to the learner as they progress through their learner journey. So it's this notion of it watching the consumption pattern of you and those other folks who have also interact with a particular course or an assignment or an assessment, and then curate the best, the most liked. It'll take into consideration social context. It'll take into consideration quality of the article. It will take into consideration recommendations by leadership. There's a lot of ways you can influence what gets curated, but the cool thing is it will do that, and it allow you to just override it as part of building these learning journeys and creating these sort of rich multimedia learning experiences. So some really cool stuff there. I'll also show you in combination, or discussing combinations with personalization, the idea where it will prompt you. There are programs that I've personally demoed that will actually prompt you through the creation of using competencies of a program that you could either author or curate pre-existing courses from, say, your course catalog. It'll allow you to assemble those materials around various subjects to make the best learning experience as quickly as possible. So those two tend to come together. So curating content in terms of extracting from the big content pool, or personalizing journeys, helping you select those key elements that will make the learning best for the learner. Coaching and feedback, probably the coolest area that I've seen is we're seeing a lot of tools establish a rubric for feedback and then basically watch the session or the or the conversation or the coaching exercise and then provide the coach, the teacher, the student, the person practicing with a set of feedback that will include not only how you performed, but what perhaps you should do to master. And it's really cool to see there's even the ability for the heads of L&D or the heads of the program to go in and tweak some of those variables to make them unique to your situation. But basically, they're establishing models that can, and you drop in the video in whichever way it gets shared, and then basically it evaluates your performance on a variety of attributes, whether it be engagement, how reinforcing your messages were, whether or not you use data correctly, whether or not you mastered those elements of the portfolio that you should have been sharing in a session. Like, it'll evaluate that session on multiple levels. And how powerful is that for you to be able to go somewhere, practice, and then get immediate feedback with no individual intervention? This will be purely from the system. You can evaluate it. It'll show you how it developed the score it gave you. It'll show you where in the session that you used engaging phrases, or you were not when you weren't providing good eye contact. It'll give you all kinds of feedback about your session, and that's just one example of them. I've seen them in communication skills. I've seen them on sales interactions. I've seen them on customer service interactions. They've long been a big part of customer service interactions, but it's exciting. That's an exciting area, because as we all know, as folks in learning and development, we just need them to practice once they've learned what they've learned, and we know that they're going to be that much better. So super exciting area there for sure. Coding support. One of the things that I've found particularly interesting is the ability to use ChatGPT and others to actually create code to allow you to interconnect existing learning systems, whether it be, how do I get my code from my LMS, and how can I get that code put into another system? Well, they'll use industry standard data connectors, and they'll give you the code, at least the first pass of the code, that you'll be able to use to connect those two systems. And it may take an iteration or two or three, but the coding support is one of those things that I think will really help every one of us make connections across our systems, using things like Zaps, for example. Learner support and assistance, that's kind of been around in a variety of formats, for quite a bit, but I think they're getting better. So that could be learner support in the course. So it could be a set of questions and answers that AI has developed to support the actual learning in module, or it could be learner support and assistance with sort of the system that you're using, or the environment that they're currently practicing in, or the lab that they're struggling with. Like, it can be set up to help coach the learner through the exercises. And again, these things all just make a more enriching experience for the learner. And that's probably at the key of why this is an exciting space for us. It can do first draft of job aids. You can tell it what it wants. I think it'll create workflows for you based on if you give it access to your current process, it'll build you a workflow model that you'll be able to use. Quick and easy. It'll even guess what the steps are in your process, so that if you don't really know for sure, you can ask it. It'll guess what the steps are, the logical steps are. For providing good feedback, as an example. So it'll guess what the job aid should be that everybody should have when they're providing good feedback, and then you can go back and check it with a subject matter expert, or adjust it to, again, the things that fit best in your work environment. Obviously, anything that's a computer interaction, like simulations, it gives you even more processing power to understand all of the interactions that each employee did with the game. And I think that's bringing out some really exciting and interesting observations. So again, it's finding the point at which the student maybe deviated from the learning by understanding its application in the context of the simulation. So I think that's a really exciting area, and probably one of the early places to emerge when we started seeing the value of data in both correcting the quality of the simulation and also observing where perhaps the instruction didn't meet the need to make sure that the application would be correct in the simulation. So pretty interesting and exciting stuff going on there. First draft of a translation or a localization, here's my transcript. Give it to me in language A, give it to me in language B. Is it going to be perfect? No, but it's going to be some percentage of the way there. And again, these are all just how do we get through these processes quicker? How do we get there? Even in the coaching support tools, it will do caption transcripts for the whole event. And like I said, it'll tie, you said this phrase, and this phrase was technically incorrect, and it'll highlight it in the transcript. So you can go back and see, oops, where did I miss? Where did I get it right? And that's the fun part about, obviously I have a bit of passion about this area, but it's the exciting part about seeing these things work is knowing how real they're going to be for us very, very shortly. Automated insights strategy refinement. This can be prompts that are generated based on AI to help challenge your direction, whether it be in overall L&D and course strategy, like have I matched correctly? There's this really cool tool, I'll talk about it a little bit later, that actually you type in a competency and it tells you the skills that you should go and establish in order to achieve mastery on that competency. I mean, that would have been a bunch of work. Now, is it going to be perfect? No, but it could be 80%. So it's these kinds of things that are going to make it super exciting for us to get to the level of analysis around our learning and development programs that will allow us to make them so much better, so much quicker. The last one I saw, which I think was, one of those things that I didn't even think of that in the context of L&D. We're often responsible to promote the programs that we're rolling out, right? So what better than to have ChatGPT to take a first crack at some internal marketing emails on how to get people to be interested and excited about your program, because sometimes it's our responsibility to do that campaign to make the change happen. Well, there you go. You got a marketing assistant all of a sudden that you didn't have before, where you can ask them, how do I best SEO the page so that it gets found on the internal internet, or how do I set up an internal social page for the course? What should I be talking about in the context of the course? Or how do I refine my email marketing? It can be there for you for all of these things. And again, I've been lucky enough to actually see specific examples of all of these working real time, and it's exciting and it's coming.
And now for the wet blanket. Huh?
I'll pause. And Elizabeth, did anything bump up to you? The chat was exploding, so I couldn't follow it all.
It is exploding, and lots of questions coming in too. There were a lot of reactions specifically around the coaching and feedback use case.
Yeah.
So a couple people were wondering if you could share any specific tools or platforms that you've seen being used or that are the most common for coaching and feedback.
I promise I will share examples of that before we get wrapped up here for sure. Because and when we get to that page, I'll tell you, like way before we get to the page, I didn't just pick like the best companies necessarily. I just picked a bunch of companies that you can go take a look at that are doing a variety of things, and they're just examples. And if you want more examples or you need more, I'm sure as this year goes on, we'll be publishing more and more about who and how to get help in this area. But for everything I just talked about, I will share an example of a company as we get a little bit later in the presentation. Any other big ones? But the coaching and feedback one, that to me is the coolest piece of all, because it's associated with practice and it allows me to get better on my own. And that's exciting to me.
That was definitely one of the bigger ones. And then in relation to creating content, if you're using AI to author content, how do you attribute content to the resource where the information was obtained from?
That's my favorite question, because that is the single largest issue for me as a publisher, who, by the way, creates a bunch of content. I want to make sure that the content that gets used in it gets attributed back. And I think that's really kind of the next big challenge for AI, is to make sure, and we're going to show you a little example of how bad it is at doing that in a second. But attribution of content to source, from my perspective, is a big issue. That's why I think I'm very comfortable with its use to create first passes. But then I would always want for my courses to go back and make sure I attribute the idea to the source, which you can find. You can usually find a good example of each of the bullet points that it puts in that's real world, and you can attribute to it. So I think that's the next step. I think Bard's trying to do it a little bit better than ChatGPT but honestly, neither is really good at it, and we'll show you about that. But I do think that your opportunity, again, to kind of maintain sort of that integrity level, is to go back and attribute the ideas that it gave you to a source.
Awesome.
Great question. My favorite question.
Time for one more maybe now that several have upvoted. This one's from Alyssa, and she's wondering if we have any idea what network or AI model people in L&D are using most often to author or create content.
So I think most common use will be ChatGPT. There are some specific tools that will take it beyond that, and I'll share a couple of examples of that with you, because there's sort of the e-learning type, there's like video types, and then there's a couple others. So I'll share some examples of that in a few. But great question.
Thanks. Well, I know we have several other slides to get through, so I'll save some of these other questions for the end.
Cool.
All right, now I was going to say now for the wet blanket on all on everything that Ken was just talking about, because there are some uncomfortable truths about using AI, and from looking at some of the chat, I think there are some people in the audience that are already painfully familiar with some of these uncomfortable truths. But the first one, though, from our vantage point, is AI is not a subject matter expert. I mean, there are all it takes is a quick Google search to find grave and disturbing illustrations where it has poor performance, and they call it hallucinations is the fun word for just flat out it is making mistakes and giving wrong information. But it's also been shown it pulls through bias. There's a potential for it to be misused, especially if it's trusted or looked at as a subject matter expert in contexts where it shouldn't be. And as Ken is fond of I think poking me about sometimes, is there, like there's a few things I get uppity about learning, and ChatGPT will spout these things, and then I will argue back with it, and it will go, "Oh, I'm sorry," but then you ask it again the next time, and it's going to hallucinate the same thing. It's going to give you the same wrong answer. So there, when we're using these AI tools, I think there is a risk of leaning on them as if they are a subject matter expert, rather than kind of reserving the well, is this correct or not judgment for an actual person. And to put it in less kind terms, it's a flagrantly dumb, emotionally vacant, but incredibly resourceful assistant, not an employee stand-in. So it will be very confidently stupid in the responses that it gives you sometimes, and it has no sense of impact for what it's doing, and as it says on the slide, these tools lack a local comprehension of cause and effect. So they aren't able to kind of wrestle with what are the consequences of this information being wrong. Like what level of sure or not is the tool. And I see some of the things in the chat, like, yeah, key takeaway, AI is dumb. And for what it's worth too, I mean, the idea that these language models represent some sort of sentient intelligence is I think the fence that a lot of people jump over, that we're not at a point yet with these tools where we can actually jump over that fence. And the issue kind of when it boils down to it is all these things will learn. They do an awesome job of it. But what it learns is often the core issue, because it doesn't always learn or it doesn't always pick up the patterns that are valid. And again, this ties back to it not being a subject matter expert or a replacement for human judgment or reasoning. So like these things can help us a lot, but they're a tool, not necessarily a stand-in. Because granted, they're not going to call out sick because their car got a flat tire or something like that for work that day, but they're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. And to drive this home a little bit, for those of you who maybe haven't come across this term, this is something that I've seen in reading the little more of the academic side of some of the discussions on AI, but I think it's a very potent analogy for how to treat these tools and how to approach something like ChatGPT or Google Bard or any of the other tools that are APIs that sit on top of one of those things. So this is a paper that was published in 2021, headed by Emily Bender. So there's 4 authors on it. 2 of them worked at Google. Both of them that worked at Google got fired in the aftermath of this paper being published. This thing has gotten cited 1,500 times in the space of 2 years, and it says a lot of things in the paper, but the main point they make and kind of what has stuck is this idea of a language model being a so-called stochastic parrot. And stochastic is a fancy word, just means like a system or process that has something random in it. But the point that they make about this is these language models, they're stitching together, words and putting things in a grammatical framework so it sounds like it makes sense, but it's doing it all based on probabilities. Like the model itself doesn't have any reference to what do these words mean? What are the implications of stitching these particular phrases together? And so in that sense, these study authors call these types of models a stochastic parrot. All it's going to do is reproduce the language, and the stochastic or the random part comes in because it's pulling it from all these billions and potentially trillions of parameters. So that's what's responsible for, if you give ChatGPT the same question, but you phrase it 2 different ways, you'll get 2 slightly different answers. You put something in Google Bard, you can ask it for a couple drafts. This is kind of what's driving the underneath of that. But the point of this is that these language models, like what they do with language, the output that we get, it sounds impressive, but it really doesn't know what it's doing. That and there's a tendency for both researchers and just those of us that use these models to mistake the performance gains that we see from these models as actual natural language understanding.
So we'll give you an example really quickly to make up a bit of time. I won't spend a ton of time on it, but we asked, one of the things we were thinking about doing was creating digests, which was a collection of the best training industry articles. So we asked it, hey, what are the best articles we should share with somebody? So most read, most liked articles that we should share with somebody who wants to learn about leadership development from trainingindustry.com from 2021 to 2022. And it came back and it said, here are some of the most read posts from trainingindustry.com in 2021 and 2022 that you should read to learn more about leadership development. So we got this list and we're looking at it, we're like, right, okay, the top leadership development trends in 2021 and beyond. That sounds good. By Sarah Pfister-Gale. I think she's written for us before. I know Joel has. I know Kevin has. Yeah, this is a pretty good list. Yeah, it looks like all these people have written for us. Well, that's pretty cool. Then we went back and read the titles of all these articles. We couldn't find any of them. They were actually collections of phrases that made sense in the context of what a good article title would be by somebody who clearly we like because we publish on our website, but in fact, they don't exist. And it wasn't just one of them that didn't exist, none of them existed. So that's the thing you have to be super careful about.
Yeah, all of it, and we did this a couple times as well, and every time the entire list of stuff was just nonsense. Sounded right, but nonsense.
Like we literally went searching around the web because I said it has to be an article. It has to be the title because the title sounded great. It was a great title. and we couldn't find any of them. So that's the cautionary tale.
Yeah. And it's not just ChatGPT. I mean, there's a long history of the, and I'm sure some of the people in the audience are familiar with many of these. Like there's the good old classic TAI from 2016, kind of the first exposure most people had to the kind of like, this is why we can't have nice things. You put an AI on the internet and people ruin it in a weekend. So that, and that was several years ago. A little more recently, there was an instance where Amazon was trying to use AI to run their recruiting tool, and it was biased against women. So again, this is an example of the model is going to learn something, but what it learns is it was based on biased data to begin with, and so you end up with a model that is similarly biased. A little more recent. This is a snap from an MIT report, that was talking about the fact that lots of AI tools were developed to try to help COVID, and none of them really worked. And so this to us underscores the idea that no success is guaranteed simply because you have an AI involved. It's not a magical thing that insert AI into training and now all our training outcomes are fixed. So just the presence of it isn't gonna fix much. And even kind of more recently, like in the news cycles right now, is Snapchat's My AI. They pushed, it's based on GPT-4, so it's a large language model like a lot of the things that we're using now. But Snapchat pushed this on people. There was concerns about security, the appropriateness. People wanted to disable it. Disabling it was a problem. So beyond the fact you had some parents annoyed, even how users were able to use or turn it off or interact with it, was an issue. Now, all that said, given the big wet blanket I've thrown on some of the stuff, rather than put anyone off, hopefully these illustrate that for all the excitement, there are limitations to consider, and there are missteps to try to avoid when we're deploying these things in training.
Yeah, I'm still excited.
Yeah, ditto. All right, so let's talk really quick about some of the wild and woolly world of AI tools as we see it. But first, let's do another poll. So we wanted to know how, those of you on the webinar, how might your organization be most likely to apply AI in training? Is it in content creation, making courses, so that we can do more other things? Is it analytics and insights? So analyzing skills gaps, that sort of thing. Is it learner support? Help chatbots, job aids like Ken was talking about, or sending them inspirational kitten photos, whatever it might be. Or is your organization kind of in Camp D, where you're most likely to apply it straight into the trash can?
Okay, everybody, once again, we've got this poll question running. We'll give you a few moments to put in your responses. Let us know, how might your organization be most likely to apply AI in employee training? Ian says A, B, and C. Sorry, this one's not multiple choice, most likely. We'll give you maybe 5 more seconds with this one open. All right, let's see what everyone has to say.
All right, cool. I'm glad only 4% of people said applying it straight into the trash can. But an interesting mix. So slightly over half of everybody is saying content creation is where you might be likely to apply it, and everyone else seems kind of split between the analytics and learner support. So interesting. Yeah, and I think interesting that content wins.
I think it's exciting because I think learner support and the broad definition of it to include coaching is really where we're going to get some huge value. So it's exciting.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about the world of tools a little bit. So kind of as we said already before, AI is not new, but many of the applications of it are. Whether we're talking about content creation, analytics, learner support, all of the kind of whole world of potential that's out there. And the way we see it, the toolkit that's already available outpaces most organizations' level of realistic use. but the tools are out there. And the impact and worth of these tools depends on kind of how we put them to use. But one point we wanted to make is that a lot of learning leaders we're already accustomed to his presence, even if it's in the form of simple AI, and our experience levels are quickly rising. And the novelty is now, I think, found in the application rather than just, ooh, we're using AI. You know, like AI itself doesn't really have a novelty factor as much anymore. It's, well, how are we using AI? And here's an example from some data we have. So we were asking a sample of 324 learning leaders, kind of what sort of features they expected to be in various types of technology platforms to address different sort of problems. And so this is the results of when we gave them a list of administrative features, and we're kind of asking them, like, where do you see these things falling out? So as you can see all the way on the left, like for things like competency or skill management, you know, like half of this sample of learning leaders said, like, yeah, we would expect that to be in any platform we would use, just kind of as a standard feature. But what we thought was interesting is looking at the results for AI-driven content. You know, 22% expected it to already be sort of in there. 68% expect to pay for it in some way, shape, or form, but only 9% said it's irrelevant to their company. You know, and so again, this is at the level of learning leaders. So like, you know, using AI for content kind of seems like the next frontier for many of us, but I think we've been anticipating this. We've been waiting for it. Sort of similarly, same sample, or this comes from the same study. We were asking them about reporting and analytics features. You know, so again, on the left, you can see things like test scores. Like, yeah, most people expect that to be a basic feature. But for AI-enabled analytics, almost a third of the sample expected that to be a basic feature. And again, only 7% said it's irrelevant to their business. You know, so when we're asking, or when we've been asking learning leaders, you know, they either think it's already here, or they're waiting for it to get to where they are. Very few of them see it as something that their business has no need for. And on the flip side of that,
we also asked leaders and leaders in the organization, so C-suite type of people, and 20% of them viewed emerging technologies, AI, blockchain, as a priority going forward. And that was further reinforced in a Gartner Group article that came out 7 days ago that said 21% of CEOs believe that generative AI will profoundly impact their business over the next 3 years. The only thing that was more important to them was which is also great for us because it's what we want them to be worried about, which is attracting and retaining top talent, which is really our first two on this list, focusing on employee well-being, coaching and mentoring, making the employees we have better and stronger, as well as resilience, hardness, and stress tolerance. So they're starting to see that there are some employee-related things, but that this technology is also coming.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I think next we wanted to talk through a few examples, or as Ken has promised, some of the tools and things that we've seen that are out there. But leading into that, we wanted to get another pulse, see where everybody is at. So last time we asked how you might apply it. Here, what we're curious about is where you might be likely to apply it, you know, or kind of to what end. You know, so is it something like leadership or sales coaching? So in other words, like helping learners directly. So the focus of why would you deploy AI would be for the sake of learners. Is it B? Is it to help L&D staff, you know, to accelerate content creation, to ease some of the tasks that you know, those working inside the learning stack have to contend with. C, or you might use it for data insights. D, as Ken said, I mean, frankly, one of my favorite applications too, for things like coding, any sort of technical help, you know, because it'll hallucinate stuff if you ask it some questions, but like it's not going to hallucinate Python code, you know, for instance. Or again, E, would you probably apply it straight into the trash can?
All right, our last poll of the day. Go ahead and submit your responses here. I'll give you 5 more seconds to do so. We can move forward with those tools everyone's dying to see.
Yeah, please go ahead and vote.
All right, 3, 2, 1. here we are.
Right answer. Very good. As everyone says, the top two for sure. And that's where and what I'll get into quickly, we can go to the next slide, is I'll give you some examples because that's really where the technologies are focused. So there are companies like Arist and Course AI. Course AI is an interesting one. It's a small company out of Brazil. And I had a chance to meet with their CEO, and they're in beta form right now. And they had 10,000 courses built across 140 different countries in the first 3 weeks of existence. So guess what? We're all using and trying these things, which is really cool to see. Aris is another custom content tool that'll help you use it in the context of building courses, actual course building, and helping you through the course building exercise. Viond is the same kind of thing, but it's more for video animation. So it's again a prompt. It does things for you. It takes action without you having to actually go and code things. Synthesia is a really cool avatar program where you take somebody, they do a video, they take the video, they create your avatar, and then from then on, all you do is type in text, and the avatar will do the whole delivery of that text, and in any language. eLearning Brothers have a program called Rehearsal, which is really cool, and they do the AI coaching of the sales training practice that you're doing. So Rehearsal is their practice technology. In there, they do AI coaching. Talk Me Up is a really cool new product that's coming to markets around communication skills. Same kind of idea. You take your Zoom meeting, you drop it on the platform. It does all of your transcripts. It tells you where a variety of things took place during the session and whether they were positive or negative to your overall communication skill. It can be used in a bunch of different ways. Anders Pink is a cool one. It's been around for a while, but they were purchased by Go1, and Anders Pink is there to help enrich the course. Go1 is a repository of courses, and it's not just Go1. We're seeing AI being used with Degreed, Skillsoft, any of the big catalog companies who have a lot of courses in it, helping you build learning journeys, pathways through the programs to make your employees perform better. And maybe the last one I'll tie on is Zavi. That's the cool one I was mentioning about the competency, loading the competency, and it'll give you AI, will give you the skills. So some examples, there are so many out there. These are all fun to kind of poke because they have real models that exist today. Like I said, stay tuned to Training Industry. We'll be bringing a lot more of this stuff your way. I think we got 2 minutes left. Yeah.
Yep. So to wrap things up, what are the takeaways that we hope you're walking away from today with? Hopefully, if you weren't sure what a large language model was, or if you maybe seen it in an article but weren't sure kind of what that meant, hopefully we helped by explaining kind of what is underneath ChatGPT and all these other things that we hear the name of, but it's kind of like what. Yes, it's a duck or a chicken. What's a bird? Like defining kind of what it is at the core. Hopefully you agree with us. The point that AI is not a subject matter expert. You still need humans. We still need to be on the back checking the output of it, making sure that what gets put together is correct. It doesn't have any weird stuff in it. Hopefully you agree with us. There are many applications for AI and L&D, many that are going on right now, and many that are also potential in the future. Some of it may seem like the far off future. Some of it is probably right around the corner. And also that the market is already innovating. That anytime it feels like we have wondered, like, is somebody using AI to do this? More often than not, like there's already 4 or 5 companies doing it. No sooner can you think of the idea that you can find several people in the market already trying to flex whatever that muscle is. So it's an exciting time.
And with that, I think we answered most of the questions I see in the Q&A, Elizabeth, unless I'm wrong. I'll just offer up my email, ktaylor@trainingindustry.com. If there's a question, ktaylor@trainingindustry.com. I'd be happy to answer it or share anything else that we might have to help you out.
Thanks, everybody. I know we had lots of questions, lots of chat throughout this event. So thanks for your participation. And I think we've got lots of plans for the content of this webinar being turned into some other exciting content on trainingindustry.com. So maybe you'll see some other answers to any questions that were left open there. And thanks to Ken and Tom for this great session.
It was fun.
Just a few closing words and remarks from me. Of course, I would like to invite you to join us for some of our upcoming training industry webinars happening later on this week or even next month. You can register for these programs, watch past webinars now at trainingindustry.com. And all of our webinars are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. CPTM is the Certified Professional and Training Management Program, and it's the only credential focused specifically on the training manager job role. By earning this credential, you'll gain the skills needed to manage corporate training programs that align with your company's current and future goals. You can learn more and get certified at trainingindustry.com/CPTM. And we would love to meet you all in person for the 2023 Training Industry Conference and Expo, or TICE. That's happening in just one month. TICE is where learning leaders gather to forge new connections and invest in becoming a more effective learning leader. So you can learn more about that. It's happening next month in Raleigh, North Carolina, TICE2023.com. Once again, thanks so much for everyone's participation in today's event. We'll be sending out the recording later on today. Thanks to our speakers, Ken, Tom, and everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time, I'm Elizabeth Parker. Bye, everybody.
See ya.